Hello, everyone. Welcome to Psychology and Spirituality, a bridge to better life discussion. During our weekly episodes, we explore this intersection of spirituality and psychology, and we get, as a result, some timeless wisdom that are contained in both fields. So I'm so happy to be here and so happy to be with Dr. Anahy Fonseca. How you doing?
Doing great, thank you. And I'm very happy to be here with you, Marcia, and everybody else again.
Awesome. Thank you. Um, Anaí, my question to all of us is one regarding the topic of discussion today, but the question, rhetorical as it may be, but are we ready to embark on a journey of self discovery, of healing, of reflection? And I ask that because I would like to shed light into some really amazing, profoundly amazing teachings from the Gospel of Luke, and with that, potentially explore the timeless content of the parables of the lost, as we call them, right? So those three parables are stories that speak to the wounded child within all of us and bring to us the concept, the content, and the power of mercy, as well as the joy of rediscovering what we thought was lost. So, I propose explore how these stories hold the keys to unlocking some emotional and spiritual needed healing, right? And whether I don't know, maybe we're seeking peace, we're seeking healing, or simply seeking for deep understanding of our inner world. The Gospel of Luke, specifically chapter 15, holds three, I guess, three of the most powerful parables of the lost, right? So they're considered the lost sheep, the lost coin, and the lost son. We've talked about the lost son for a while now. But, anyways, those parables offer to me not just a spiritual lesson, but actually a deep psychological study of human behavior because it explores our emotions, the internal battles we all face, and together I propose that we can perhaps reflect on the ideas of mercy, compassion, the healing journey of rediscovering what has been lost within us. So let's go ahead and get started. I wanted to give a little bit a 2 minute uh, re- refresher on those parables. So the first one, of course, is that we must know that. The Gospel of Luke, there's such beauty, Anaí, and it's really undeniable that it is considered one of the most beautiful books ever written. And Luke captures somehow the essence of Jesus' mission. And he does that with grace, with perhaps tenderness, with compassion. And if you think about it, Jesus' journeys toward Jerusalem, right there, he shared, and we find that in some of the writings by Joanna de Angelis, by the way, but Jesus shared 19 parables, and each one of those taught us some nuggets of about the human nature, about spiritual growth, and even how this idea of how we relate with one another. And so, because of it, the Gospel of Luke is often called the Gospel of mercy and compassion. I love it, and it's really for good reason that it's known as that. So it's in this gospel, Naia and everyone here, that we encounter one of the most essential aspects of the human experience, the idea behind the acts of mercy, right? If we think about it, mercy and compassion are actually not just concepts, they are the foundation of what it means to be fully human, don't you think? Mercy is not just about, oh, I'm feeling pity for you that is so hurt and poor and in need. No, it's really about perhaps sharing in the emotional toil or even the joy in another's happiness, how we can embrace their victories and really act with passion and, most importantly, with tenderness with each other's struggles. So, if we go back to chapter 15 of Luke, there are those three unforgettable parables, by the way, and they're very, I'm going to say perhaps very shortly on those. And those considered the parables of the lost. The first one, number one, is a parable of a shepherd who had 100 sheep. He loses one and he leaves the 99 behind and searches tirelessly for that lost sheep. When he finds it, he rejoices with his friends and neighbors and he says, "Rejoice with me, I found my lost sheep." So, in the same way, Jesus teaches that there is more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous people who don't need to repent. So, second parable, a woman who has 10 coins, 10 silver coins, and loses one. And she searches her entire home. She lights the lamp. She sweeps every corner. She works tirelessly until she finds it. Once she finds it, she calls all her friends and neighbors to rejoice with her, saying, "Rejoice with me, I found my lost coin." Just like the first parable, there's joy over one sinner, right? That's the story, the reference, who repents. And finally, we come to the story of the prodigal son, an old one for this podcast. We talked about it for several episodes, such a beauty. But for those who have not heard it, it's a narrative that speaks deeply, more than the others, about that wounded child within us. And the parable of the prodigal son reveals that unconditional love and mercy of a father who embraces and welcomes back his lost son with open arms. So, Anaí, what can we learn from these parables? What are your thoughts?
Well, great parables. Just a reminder to everyone, I think we have previously talked about that, why Jesus used parables.
Mhm.
Why did he use them and not, talk straightforward to people? You are doing this, and you should be doing this and that. And I think it's very important for us to remember that parables that come from it's a Greek word, right? That it's from two small words, para, that it means beside, and bol, that means to throw. So he was it's a parable is an analogy, right?
Mhm.
He was using analogies, illustrations, images, and small stories to illustrate something that is timeless, Marcia and everyone, because he was using archetypal stories and
Mhm.
emotions and situations, right? And I think it's so important that we are talking about this in these days that we are living in, because aren't we as humanity kind of lost in our days? Everybody, in different parts of the world, suffering this and that, with a lot of crisis going around. So that's timeless. The sense of being lost or of losing ourselves, and what is implicit in that is that and at some point we're going to find ourselves. So it's kind of the archetype of death and rebirth. We could also make this analogy. Something inside of us is dead to our consciousness, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if it's not in here, our psyche, if it's not in our consciousness, then we could say that it's dead for consciousness. It's in the unconscious, right? So it's lost for consciousness, for our ego, let's say, for our consciousness here in this world. So this can happen and happens with all of us. We can think we are talking about the teachings of Joanna de Angelis and spiritist knowledge, right? So we know that when we kind of fall in this world, material world, where we are going to have our spirit, the knowledge of our spirit, in the depths of our unconscious. As Joanna says, and we already know that, sorry, people, that
Mm-hmm.
for Joanna, what Jung called the self, capital S, is the spirit, how it is here in our psyche with us, but in the depths of our unconscious, okay? So the self, sorry, the ego has more relation to the personal unconscious. And
Mm-hmm.
you talked about the inner, the child, the hurt child, the
Yeah.
inner child.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one of our complexes
Yeah.
that are here in this life because, of course, our father and mother, our parents were not perfect. We are not perfect. So, of course, we are going to kind of hurt each other. We are going to have traumatic memories from our childhood. Of course, hopefully, good memories also together with loving memories. But at some point, we're going to have memories of hurt, of being lost, of not being understood by our father or mother, right? For the adults that are taking care of us when we are children. So
Mm-hmm.
this would be traumatic experiences that stay with us our whole life, right? And we kind of lose something when we are in contact with these experiences. So we can lose the joy, we can lose the sense of security, right? So this is very personal. This is kind of made very up to date in when we come to this life. But let's not forget that in the core of all our complexes, our crises, our neurotic patterns, there are the archetypes. They are in the core of them, right? Because we have experienced in many, many lives similar situations. And while we haven't, as spirits evolving, as ourself, our spirit is evolving. So while we don't integrate the issue,
Mm-hmm.
it's not part of us. It's not solved yet. It's not integrated. It casts shadows, and the shadows will come with us. Our resentments, our hurts, our not understanding and not forgiving. You've talked about mercy and compassion as in the Gospel of Luke, so beautiful. It's like a psychotherapy, spiritual
Yes.
psychotherapy, as Joanna says. These parables, they're wonderful because we kind of always are getting lost or losing something that is very precious to us. And it's great that you made a summary of the parable so that we can all try to connect with these beautiful images and small stories that Jesus um, actually he taught us, but to ourselves, our spirits, because at that point, of course, a lot of people couldn't understand even the stories, couldn't reflect upon them. And you see, I remember that Joanna talked about, gave some examples, like Peter, for instance, when he denied Jesus 3 times, right? And he was his friend. He was, he would call Jesus master, and he had a lot of faith, of
Mm-hmm.
course, because he was learning with Jesus. He recognized Jesus as the master, as, the Messiah, right? But how come then in those moments, and Jesus told him he would deny him, how come he would lose? It would seem to us that he had lost his faith, right, in Jesus. But we know that was the ego, that was his fear of the pain that he would have to suffer if he didn't deny Jesus, for instance, and then everything that he would have to go through. Let's not cast the first stone, right? Because being impaled in a cross or this and that, that was horrible. And you would have to be really spiritually evolved and with the capacity of being this life with all the spiritual wisdom. Wow, that was too much for the apostles, right?
Yeah.
So just think about Peter. That's one of the examples that Joanna brings to us. Temporarily, we could say he lost, not that he lost his faith, but he lost his courage. And let's remember that core is in Latin is heart, right? And
Mm-hmm.
agire is like act. So courage is to act with the heart, with the loving energy of the heart. So at that in that moment, like Peter lost this capacity temporarily of acting with the courage of his heart, because in his heart he knew that Jesus was the Messiah, that Jesus was the Master who was bringing the real kingdom, the path to the real kingdom of the God of God, so that we could finally live, through this path, finally reach this kingdom. And that it was an inner kingdom, actually, because it was developing everything that you said, that you refer to the Gospel of Luke, of
Mm-hmm.
mercy, compassion, and love towards each other. So, and forgiveness, all of that.
Yeah.
So we could say that Peter lost temporarily, this courage, but it was in his spirit, it was in the self, because in the self he knew that Jesus was the master, and that he had all this connection. So we could think in psychological terms
Mm-hmm.
that he lost temporarily the connection between his ego consciousness that was his small personality, and his bigger personality, his self, his higher self, right? He lost temporarily this connection. So I think that it's a wonderful. I remember that Joanna talks a lot about this, and she really uses the expression at some point, coming to our senses, coming to ourselves,
Yeah.
really finding this connection with the wisdom that we have within ourselves. So I was thinking, Marcia, and remembering what I've read in Joanna's teachings,
Mm-hmm.
that, for instance, the sheep. When I have, I don't know if you guys have seen, and I think it's all around, maybe in the YouTube. It's actually a small movie that it's a kind of cartoon, but it's like, I think it's Jesus, okay, but it's in the backside, and there are this ship that gets lost,
Mm-hmm.
and then he goes towards this ship and he leaves the other, but they are well tended. They are not alone. And Jesus didn't want us to think, oh, you have to leave the 99 without any care. No, they are taken care of, but he went to find this one, and it was very precious because it and actually looking at that cartoon, I thought, wow, I felt like the sheep, because it was very distracted and looking this way and that way, and suddenly, I don't know if you guys have seen this, but suddenly it just came to my mind now. It kind of fell in a kind of abyss or a
Yeah,
hole or something,
yeah.
and then Jesus goes there, and because it was the ship is very weak and cannot even call, but he finds it, and he grabs the ship and brings it. And I found, wow, that's me. I am with him again, and don't we all want to have this tenderness, this loving energy feeling all around of us, and saying, whatever you do, and if you get lost, I will always be with you until the end of times. And I think that when he tells Peter that he is going to deny him 3 times,
Hmm.
and Peter doesn't believe him. No, I'm not, because I have such faith in you. I have such love for you, Master. But he does. And I understand that Jesus was not blaming him that he was going to deny him. Was
No
just telling,
accusation, right? It's just matter of fact,
no,
you will deny me 3 times.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I think he was saying, like, don't find your way back, because I know you will. And I
Ah,
forgive you in advance because I love you and I will always be with you. So I was thinking, why couldn't, Jesus, Peter, why didn't, he went in such a crisis that he would, oh, I don't deserve to to be a fisher of men, as
yes.
Jesus
Mhm.
told him, and I don't deserve to follow. If he had fallen into guilt and inflicting pain in himself and saying, oh, I'm so bad, because Joanna tells us, pay attention. If you think you are a victim of, even of your ignorance, you cannot forgive yourself, and you fall in this trap of the inner child, because we are all spiritual children, right? We
Mhm.
don't have yet a very, if compared to archangels or whatever, the higher beings that, of course, we are struggling to evolve and we have our own light, but it's still like, like spiritual children, let's say. And of course, we're going to make mistakes. What is a sinner? It's someone that is lost and that was mistaken in his worldview or in his view of the situation he or she is going through. So I
Yeah,
think it's very
everyone.
important not to feel so guilty as uh, don't understanding that we have to have compassion and mercy for ourselves in the first place. I'm sorry, have I
Absolutely.
answered?
Yes, of course. I love how deep and broad you went through. Just to restate, right? Beyond the spiritual teachings, I believe that the stories, those three stories, right, offer us this um, psychological insights that you alluded to, and it's interesting if we think about it. In these parables, we do see the collective unconscious at work, right? They do
Yeah,
reveal those deep archetypes that all of us 2,000 years ago, today, and 2,000 years from now, we all share those archetypes. And I'm wondering here, whether it's the man searching for his lost sheep, or and I can't wait to see the cartoonish little film that you mentioned, right? But regardless if it's the lost sheep or the woman search for the coin, they all just really tell us that we're all facing some internal struggle. That's life. At the core of the parables, there's also this idea that not only facing struggles, we are all experiencing loss. And loss to me, if I were to do an analogy, right? The loss is not the coin of the sheep, but it's really the loss of inner peace, the loss sometimes of our health, our emotionability, our sense of purpose. Those are all different but equally important types of loss that will destabilize us, right? And I believe life can sometimes cause us to lose these valuable treasures, right? And the key here, like the parable tells us, let's not give up, right? The lesson is to never stop searching for perhaps that sense of peace that now is lost, or health, or peace of mind that was I had it but is now lost. Joy, peace, self-worth. And I really like the idea that the search for whatever was lost is what brings us fulfillment, right? The sense of accountability and responsibility. I lost, so I will relentlessly, I will find it back. And when we get back, all of those parables, they're talking about rejoice, right? Rejoice with me. It was lost and now it's found. So it's important for us to be able to look inside of us to identify that we are suffering through loss of something, but it's up to us to look and recover that. But I wanted to pivot a little bit because you did mention the wounded child a couple of times, Anaí, and I wanted to know if we can maybe talk a little bit about it because, as you mentioned, we all carry this wounded child within us, and the wounded child we're just referencing those parts of ourselves that have been hurt by life, by challenge, by neglect, by anything, right? So, um, even I would say, even um, have been hurt by our own negative voices that we have internalized from others about ourselves. So, Anai, this is my understanding of the problem here is that this wounded child that it is a reflection of our own pain and suffering. The child often can hinder us from moving forward, right? You even mentioned that you can get stuck feeling guilty like Peter, but he didn't, right? He never did it once he found himself doing exactly what was predicted by Jesus. So we should understand and learn perhaps, or being inspired to keep moving forward, to keep looking, to keep on until we find peace and healing. Just like the lost sheep or the lost coin, we need to search for that part of ourselves that has been lost or has been buried, or it is surrounded by resentment, guilt, fear, and the finding that part would be getting to a point where we are now facing healing and even reintegration. Let's talk a little bit about this journey of healing, of reconnecting to our true selves. Can you do that a little bit? And I know you
Yes,
mentioned about it, but I'd love to hear some more if you don't mind.
yes, yes. I think it's very important because I was listening to you, Martin, and um, it came to my mind what Joanna says about coming to our senses as a
Mm-hmm.
first step. She says, actually, must be the first step to all that are sick of the soul, to
Mhm.
come to the coming to our senses, realizing, and as you said, um, that any suffering that we are going through should be conscious, in a sense that should lead us to self-awareness, to look inside of us and not outside of us. And but there's a trap here, there's a trick, a problem here, that we should pay attention. Joanna
Mhm.
says that we have to pay attention when we feel like delight in conflict. Because I can tell you, as a psychotherapist and a Jungian analyst, there are a lot of people that kind of, as Joanna says, writhe in suffering, you know, and that they choose pity, her words, choosing pity and compassion, but compassion in a sense like feeling, oh, I'm the victim,
Yeah.
not in a good sense, in a sense that I, everybody has to feel sorry for me because I am, the victim,
Mhm.
instead of the support of love and brotherhood. That's Joanna's words. So the trap here is that if you there are a lot of people, and this is a very neurotic behavior. I can tell you a clinical example. I was thinking of a middle-aged woman, lady, many years ago, that she had been actually, only if you really understand the reincarnation and this proposal that Joanna is bringing to join all the spiritist knowledge with the psychology, the depth psychology, that
Mhm.
we, going deep, understanding that we have we have an ego with its complex, but we have a higher self. We have this other, let's say, consciousness that has the knowledge that we bring with us to this experience here. Because if we don't have this understand, even some clinical examples don't make any some this my colleagues would be, naive, because many don't, unfortunately, are not open to spiritist knowledge. But we are getting there, with a lot of research and things like that, and kind of still don't accept the reincarnation cycles that we, and of course the impact that this has in our understanding of the psyche, right? But what I think it's very important, I was remembering, because this middle-aged woman
Mhm.
couldn't, she used to, all of the excuses that she made was because of the wounded child, okay?
Interesting.
And
Yeah.
what it was because, and she had undergone Freudian psychoanalysis and therapy, and of course it's all about the wounded child, but there's no way out, in a sense, because you have only to accept that you have suffered this and that your ego has developed some defenses, and try to understand your defenses. It's okay, because we have to do that, but not
Mhm.
get stuck in that. And one problem is that some people get stuck in that because they don't have the understanding, as Jung brings to us, that is very complementary, I think, to Freud and I am one of the few people that think that we should put, as Joanna teaches, actually, in my field as a psychiatrist also, that we have to learn from all these colleagues, all these, this um, these intellectuals that came before us, to understand, to open the way that we understand, to broaden, to open the way that we understand the psyche. And one of the things, Marsha and everybody, is that this lady was stuck in the wounded child, and everything You could see that behind her words was like kind of a pleasure she was stuck in the way to look at herself as a victim of a bad childhood, of parents that couldn't understand her,
Mhm.
that even if they actually, she could understand, they never abused her in any way, but she has this fantasy of she had been abused because they couldn't understand her. So everything, and this view of herself was taken in her adult life with her. So, of course, as Joanna says, she projected onto everybody else,
Mhm.
husband and children, that she was always the victim. And as Jung says, whatever doesn't come to your consciousness, gets stuck in unconscious, will be your destiny. It's other words that he used, but it's the same, that's the meaning of what he's saying. If you don't integrate the shadow, if, for instance, all the resentment and all the lack of understanding, and of course, and one of the things, this lady, of course, if she was the victim and she understood like her situation as what was lost in her relationship to her parents, right? And could never be regained the love of the the loving parents that she wanted to have had in her childhood. So she herself couldn't be a loving mother. She
Absolutely.
thought she
Yeah.
was, but of
Yeah.
course, all the shadow, the resentment, was projected onto the her own children. That, of course, could never understand her and were bad to her in a sense that wouldn't, take care of her when she was getting old and all this stuff. So, as Joanna says, then if you don't work with your shadow, and if you don't find a way to help the light of the self illuminate, the shadow,
Mhm.
and the wisdom that you have, as Peter did, and right, he
Mhm.
said, okay, I have to understand that temporarily I lost the connection, the loving energy that connects me with my master, with Jesus, and the trust in his words, because he said he was going to deny, right?
Yeah.
So what I understood from this lady, I'm just giving an example, is that she refused to understand that her
Yeah.
parents were not as bad as she was saying they had been to her, and that she brought from some other experience. I was not even talking about reincarnation because this was a very materialistic lady,
Yeah.
but you can say just look at, and Joanna asks us to do the same thing.
Yeah.
As therapists of ourselves, try to put your emotions by your side and the wounded child for a moment, and look as in a soap opera, let's say.
Yeah.
Look as in a movie. You there with your parents and the way your memories, the way that they treated you. But the parents as characters of this movie, let's say, of this soap opera. What do you see? With your adult,
Mhm.
experience of your whole life, what do you see? Now you're a mother or a father, or you have some kind of experience. And if you are really truthful to yourself, to what you are looking, you're going to see that they have not been so bad, that everybody has some bad moments, that, of course, maybe you felt wounded, but many times was not on purpose. They were just repeating what the grandfather, grandmother, your grandfather and mother have, what they have experienced as children. So it's very liberating, Marta. It's
Yes.
kind of opened we can choose if we want to have mercy and compassion, not only to others, including father and mother and grandfathers and grandmothers, grandparents, and really trust in this love that we know we have deep inside in our higher self, and understand and have compassion and mercy
Yeah,
to all, including ourselves, or if we want to get stuck in this trap of feeling forever victims, and in
absolutely.
conflict.
Yeah, what comes to my mind here is the work, for example, of family constellation, right? And we could bring some of the the movies. They're plentiful because it's something that is everywhere. The idea that we, in this case, right, we are in the midst of this complex, dynamic relationship that can lead to a lot of hurt. But the idea here with family constellation is from a therapeutical approach, address those family dynamics to explore, to review all those unconscious patterns and how they impact each other, right? So just real quickly, the some of the movies that came to my mind, and you may laugh about it, but the Royal Tenenbaums, right? Or or even The Godfather, which is all the multi-generation power struggles, or um, I think one that was deeply touched me was the pursuit of happiness, right? About this struggling father who is trying to protect his son, and it's very difficult. But I wanted to things that I wanted to say here about beyond family constellation, right? Is that when we start to think about it, Anaí, um, for any of us, whenever we decide to embark on a journey of healing, we start right off the bat to reconnect with our true selves. And as such, the child, no, I'm sorry, the adult, and I was thinking this patient that you reference, right? So that patient, a middle-aged woman, could, if embarking on true journey of healing, she could have risen above her old wounds and start to integrate the shadow with the light, as you mentioned. So I just have to say this process is not easy. Anaí.
I
It's
know.
really not at all, but it's so worth it. And this is maybe an invitation for me, if I may, that we do embark in a journey of reflection, of therapy, or even just simply taking time for introspection. And when we do that, we can begin to heal, right? To back to the parables, to start to find what has been lost and to perhaps experience the joy of integrating and becoming whole again.
Yes, I think it's very important, much because um, if we don't, I know that it's very difficult,
Mhm.
because to realize that you are being as aggressive, let's say, towards your own children,
Yeah.
as you say that you have suffered. Can you
Mhm.
imagine that?
Yeah.
Because if I, of course, you are not a victim at this point anymore, because then
Mhm.
you are the aggressor. Let's say you are repeating
The patterns,
what
right? Yeah.
patterns, yes, but it's a vicious circle. And we have to have this courage, that Peter had, that Paul of Tarsus had, so many of these wonderful souls that had this courage to say, well, I was mistaken.
Yeah.
I understand that I felt wounded,
Yeah.
But maybe, as I would like, when I am in contact with myself, with my shadow, I would like that my children can forgive me
Yeah.
because of some of my own mistakes. I can forgive my parents, for instance. I can stop being resentful. I can, stop being, because it kind of gives some people some pleasure, as I told you, because then and Joanna tells us about that, because then it's like the ego feels less guilty, because
Yeah.
the guilt is not on me, it's on the
Yeah.
others. And I think, Marcia, it's very important. We started talking about how we are lost in our
Yeah.
times. How
Yeah.
is this is so up to date. Feel people
Yes.
all around the world are feeling kind of lost. Why is still all this conflict going on?
Yeah.
But if we understand as a collective, we kind of can be repeating as a collective what in this individual, as I told you, this middle-aged woman was doing to her own children, then we would stop, accepting some sick souls, let's say, that are in power. Because if we get in this other vibrational energy,
Mhm.
um, this other vibrational field, because it's always vibration that we are talking on the bottom. When we talk about the self, as Joanna says, is our spirit.
Yeah.
So it vibrates, and it can vibrate high vibrations, love, mercy, and compassion, as you said, or low vibrations, hatred,
Fear.
resentment,
Yeah.
fear,
Yeah.
low vibrations. And if we kind of feel comfortable with our wounded child, explaining everything that we do in our lives, because of our wounded child. So I'm not doing anything. I'm projecting onto others. Of course, they are doing to me, my husband, my parents, my children, my friends. They are, doesn't matter. When I feel sad, when I feel that I lost something precious, and
Uh-huh.
then it's never my fault, because I have been wounded in the
Yeah.
past.
Yeah.
It's everybody else's fault. So what I keep doing, not only I keep this vicious circle within, as you actually, it's very good that you talked about family constellation, because it's going to constellate this archetype in my family, and we are going to pass on to the other generations.
And the
But
next, and the
and
next,
in the
and the
next and
next.
the
Yeah.
next, yes,
Yeah.
epigenetics is all about that. But we are also going to repeat in the collective, because you are also talked about collective unconscious. So we will accept others who repeat with us our wounds, inflicting us our wounds,
Mhm.
prejudice, crazy stuff, lack of liberties, and things like that. Oh, but is happening, and I don't have anything to do with that. The world has gone crazy, and no, we do have, in a sense, that we are part of this collective. So if we heal ourselves, and Joanna talks about the conquest of self-awareness, and
Absolutely.
not being afraid of our shadows, and connecting, vibrating, and changing our behaviors.
Mhm.
She asks us to have conscious suffering, because we are all going to suffer at some point. We are going to lose something, but as you said so beautifully, don't get stuck in that.
Mhm.
We bring to consciousness. We don't fear ourselves. We pay attention to our hurts, what's hurting inside of us, and we deal with our shadows, our low vibrations. Wow! Then each one of us is like a light that
Yes.
starts shining brighter, and we are not going to connect to this suffering that it's outside of us, and we actually is going we are going to change all this suffering, because then we simply are not going to connect. The world hasn't gone crazy. It's just that a lot of people are lost on their own shadow, feeling like I prefer to excuse myself that I'm forever the wounded child within me, and the others are guilty, than doing the job of self-awareness. So let's
Absolutely.
pay attention to
Yes,
our.
I love that. So just to summarize, because we had so many great nuggets of knowledge today. But today we reflect upon the parables, right? And as we think about it before we say goodbye, we should be asking ourselves, what have we lost in our lives, right? What are our treasures? What are the things or the emotions or the values within that we're still searching and we cannot find? And I'd say, be it peace of mind, be your health, your emotional balance, or simply, and I think this is the big one, simply the courage to face the challenges of life. Remember, everyone, that it's always worth the search. And when we find it, let's rejoice, right? Let's really enjoy the moment that comes from the recovery or from the healing or from the rediscovery that it happens when we do that. But I want to say thank you. Thank you for joining us today. I hope these reflections on mercy, compassion, and the journey of self discovery will inspire you to keep searching for the lost treasures within your own heart. And for those of you who tuned in for the first time, please note that the psychology and spirituality weekly talks are based on the works by Joanna de Angelis. And we hope that you're able to perhaps take a moment and expand your own concepts of spirituality and psychology. I want to thank you, Anahy, for being here with me, and also our sponsors, Mansão do Caminho, the United States Spiritist Federation, the International Spiritist Council, and AMI Brazil, the Brazilian arm of the Medical Spiritist Association. We'll be back next week, so stay tuned, and so long, everyone.
Bye bye.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Psychology and Spirituality, a bridge to a better life discussion. During our weekly episodes, we explore this intersection of spirituality and psychology, and as a result, we capture timeless wisdom containing both fields. I'm your host, Marcia Trajano, and joining me today is someone that I consider a very special guest, someone who has dedicated much of his work to understanding, exploring, and discussing this intersection of spiritual wisdom and human growth. Please welcome Yuri Castro. Yuri, how you doing?
I'm very good. Hello to everyone who's listening or watching us. It's always an honor to be here.
Oh, wonderful. Well, Yuri, today I'm proposing we have this conversation that I hope to be enlightening to all of us, including myself, right? Let's dive into some of the teachings by Joanna de Angelis because I would like to discuss this idea of an evolutionary journey of the self, right? How do we get to this? How do we understand even the path and how this path can lead us to hmm, a true sense of inner transformation? And I would like Yuri to welcome, right, as I said before. And I know that everyone here with me today are eager to also hear from you and receive some nuggets of enlightenment as we explore this deep insights that Joanna de Angelis has offered us on the topic of the journey of the self. Yuri, In her teachings, Joanna de Angelis speaks of this existence. This I touch myself in my shoulder every time I think about this body, right? This corporeal, earthly existence. And while we are in a time where everybody, and I hear that from many different platforms and or channels, many people called we live only once, right? Make sure that you enjoy life, and there's always this touch points that tells us in the wide stream general areas of input of our lives that life is brief. We right, physical life is brief, I agree, but that we in this the brevity of life, corporeal life, that we have to go with a gusto and really enjoy every aspect of sensorial, physical, tangible experience for it to have some meaning. But Joanna de Angelis, she speaks of this existence from a different point that I would like for us to talk. She speaks about this valuable learning experience, right? So we're here to learn, and she says that the learning experience points to the idea of the self, right? In a, as a the higher essence of ourself taps into the collective unconscious. So, from that perspective, we can think that a journey to the self, right, is a journey that it will be fraught, will be filled with moments of joys and triumphs, as well as the moments where we try, we fail, we get hurt, right? But in this ups and downs, if you will, we are ultimately leading ourselves into the goal of integrating our ego, the unconscious mind, and lead us to what she calls this primordial archetype, which is our divine essence, the God within, right? So, Yuri, sending to you some thoughts. Let's maybe start by, if you will, unpacking what is Joanna trying to say, right? In your experience, how can we, with your own words, understand this idea of integration of the ego and the unconscious? How can we tap into that concept in more practical terms? What does it even look like in our day-to-day lives?
Perfect. I think you have some very interesting thoughts there. The idea is, I mean, when we're thinking about the self with a capital S, as Joanna says, as Carl Jung says, we're thinking about this integration. So this process of this of integration as we go through life is extremely important because, as you said very well, nowadays there is this sort of culture or this understanding of the YOLO, you only live once. So we try to please our senses. We try to make everything that's material better in an attempt to make us feel better, the inside feel better. But the reality of it is, yes, this life is brief when compared to the immortality of the soul, through the full individuation, for the accomplishment of the self with a capital S. When we fully integrate that, as we saw with our master Jesus, the biggest and greatest example we've had of a being that has reached this process of the individuation and was extremely integrated and still came here to teach us. So this idea, I think, of the integration, yes, it will pass through, as you said very well, these trials and tribulations and these challenges that we have to go through. We have to overcome them because, as Joanna says very well, in her books, she's always talking about how one is always growing. The person is always growing at every existence. Every time that we are here on earth, we're learning something every time. Like, and I'm speaking of earth, so it's more it's shorter for us to understand. But every time we're here, we're incarnated. We are definitely learning something as we go through life. And I think this process, the trials and errors and the mistakes that we make, they serve to, and we can talk about the shadow as well eventually, but for us to understand a little bit more of the shadow, a little bit more of the ego, and the understanding of how everything sort of connects.
Yeah, I love it. And I think two things, Yuri. Number one, when we talk about all the elements, right, that comes to play in this material existence, this incarnation, this life that we live as our personality, it's almost like a play or even a movie, right? The actor
Yes.
comes in, and there are all the sets of circumstances, the plot, the aptitudes, the attitudes of the actors, how that actor, that the character that the actor plays really brings into certain elements that will lead to the ultimate, in the fiction perspective, right, the ultimate goal of resolution of a major conflict. I think it speaks to us in our own journeys, right? We
Yes.
all
Hmm.
of this, yeah, this orchestration of what is life, the family that we are born from, the education, the set of friends. If we, for example, I know a lot of people here, Yuri, that are uh, people that their parents were part of the armed, the army or navy, etc. And as that lifestyle, they kept moving every 2 years in a different city, in a different country, a different continent, right? And their journeys are much more different than, for example, mine. I was born in this house, and until I got married, that's the only structure, physical structure that I called home, the same city. Therefore, my identity are in all of the things that I call home are deeply integrated with that site, that physicality, those people in the neighborhood, so on and so forth, right? But another aspect that you mentioned here brought me a thought, right? The YOLO thought process. You only live once, and this desire, this zest for life, really equates with, as you mentioned, pleasing our senses. And the inherent paradox of that is because we are focused on, fulfilling our lives with opportunities for, say, experiences or whatever it is that we can touch, right, the more tactical, tangible part of our lives. But it's really a symptom of our emptiness, that
Yes.
existential, right? Existential emptiness. And the more we address that emptiness with things that are ephemeral, the more empty we become, right?
Yes, I think again you're touching on very important psychological topics because again this idea of pleasing our senses and pursuing material pleasures, this is very much ingrained and on par with our own evolution as spirits. We are in a planet that is very much materialistic and where the matter still exerts a strong influence on us given our evolution as immortal spirits. So
Right.
it is only natural that we would find the matter exerting this much control over our thoughts, control over what we're going to do. We even have in our brains, the way they are developed, we have these dopamine pathways
Yeah.
where,
Yeah.
where let's say social media or material pleasures, they give us this quick reward of dopamine, this
Yes.
quick shot of
Right.
dopamine
Yeah. Yes.
on demand nowadays even. So it
Yeah.
becomes very much that addictive sort of personality or addictive persona to the pleasures and the material. things. So it is very much tied to what you said. This the emptiness. It's also tied to this idea of we're still evolving. We're still very materialistic because of our condition as spirits, because of the planet that houses us in this evolutionary process that we're currently in. And if I may add another thing too, when you mentioned it, it made me think of, when you said the emptiness, made me think of Joanna de Angelis in her books when
Mm-hmm.
she's talking. She's saying, she goes to say that there is a natural tendency for some people to feel sad. She says there's a
Yeah.
natural tendency for some people, especially like nowadays, human beings to have this melancholic state and feel this sadness. And she even brings it up that sometimes this sadness, now diving into a little more of the psychological aspect, she's saying that this sadness oftentimes is the guilt that was internalized and is being externalized as self-punishment from other reincarnations.
Yeah.
So again, showing this continuum of our existence and how everything interconnects. The things we still need to learn, they very much interconnect with things that we may have made a mistake in a past life, or we may have not gathered that lesson yet. So we need to come here and then try again and learn from it again. What do you think?
Yeah. I love it. I love the where you're putting here the root cause, if you will, right? We feel
Yes.
something, we may feel empty, we may feel sad. I tend to, if I look at the landscape of my community, right, Yuri, the majority of individuals that I know, and I'm speaking to professional speaking, right, very, very, very successful people, financially, with their family, their meeting their objectives, everything is on par, yet the level of anxiety, Yuri, is unbelievable. And
Mm-hmm.
so my heart cries when I see that. And we can think about it, that living is not for the faint of heart. We all are somehow subject, but even then, the anxiety for having to meet the standards and demands of this world, right?
Yes.
It's counterbalanced to what you're saying, and that is a topic that Joanna brings whenever she's speaking about guilt. That somehow the root cause of it all, for the sadness or even for the anxiety, etc., or any other psychological, behavior issues that we're going through, psychological and behavior issues, we are really talking about the fragmented, right, area of our psyche, our soul, our spirit is going through life, but feeling very much not whole, not it just grasping between the duality of living life as a spirit in the material world. So those polarities keep almost like a ping pong. I'm here, but I'm not there, and I'm there, but I'm not here.
Yes.
Right? So we're
Absolutely, ping pong is a great way of looking at it, and also one thing that ties very well with what you said, and I think is this idea of free will that Joanna de Angelis so aptly talks about in her books. This idea of through our reincarnations that we have the free will is what allows us, is this instrument that allows us to choose. And she says between good or evil, joy or sadness, like she gives opposites like that. And I
yeah,
really appreciate that part in her saying that, because she then says that the only determinism, the only fatality that exists is plenitude. It's like the
yes,
only
love it.
the only thing that is certain and is this that's it's determined is that we will reach plenitude, that we will reach this process of individuation, that we'll reach that point eventually, a long time from now, I think. But
Yeah,
we will reach that point. So that's a beautifully optimistic way of looking at something that seems sometimes so drastic, so drab, even where we're thinking, oh, deterministic, it's bad, we're doomed to suffer. No, we're doomed for plenitude, we're doomed for quotation marks, and doomed for
yeah.
we're destined to plenitude.
So Yuri here, right? You are referencing actually the content of two books that I love, by the way. by Joanna de Angelis. Number one is the integral human being,
Yes.
right? So she speaks about all the things that potentially are distracting us from ourselves or moving away from ourselves, and the need, if you will, to integrate, to create a sense of wholeness into our journeys in that book, The Integral Human Being. And the next book in her series is Plenitude, that you just referenced, where in the movie she talks about many different things. But one of the items, Yuri, that in that's the third book of the series, I believe, Plenitude, in that she suggests that this journey, if we're talking about the journey of the self, right? This journey that we go through allows us to confront, but also overcome psychological conflicts. So we talked about this before, right? Yuri, the idea of all the suffering that the journey in a physical existence are really inherent in those paths, in our choices, free will, right? And the consequences of our choices. But she suggests that as we are, overcoming, transcending our conflicts, psychological conflicts in this case, as we do that, it really a mechanism, it's a catapult for us to free from the burdens from the past, right? So as we become freer in fear, once we overcome those conflicts, we are able or enabled, if you will, to be closer to a, how can I say, an understanding of the divine within. So it seems that this process can also tie quite well. So we're talking about plenitude, we talked about the integral human being, but with also tying with the idea that Carl Gustav Jung brought to us, the idea of individuation, which, you know, in so many words, just means that in the process of individuation, we, you, Yuri, you here in our life, me, we all becoming our true, authentic selves. Can you speak a little bit more about these psychological conflicts and how it is important for us to face them, not hide away from them, so that we can overcome?
Absolutely. And I think, again, it goes through this idea, as you're saying before, of life. There's no life without pain. The life that we know, there's no life without pain or suffering. The suffering, we discussed this in a different episode of this podcast. But this idea that we should see or could see perhaps the suffering, the shortcomings, the pain that we sometimes face as instruments for our own process of this integration that you're talking about, this eventual the reaching of our plenitude. So the integration of the process is looking at the conflicts that we still have within us, because it's internal. We bring with us these conflicts from other lives, from other points of our existence, and we must face them. We must address them. We must uncover them, understand them. And I'll just make a parenthesis here, oftentimes with professional help. But the eventual goal is to uncover them, understand them, so we can address them, because otherwise they're not going to go away on their own. They're not going to, if they continue to be unsolved or unresolved, perhaps we can say, they're going to carry on. If we have something that we must accomplish, let's say now more on the spiritual side, if we have something we must accomplish in this life, or we set forth as our goal, and we're shying away from that, we're hiding from that, but we need that specific thing to reach the next level, we will have to face it eventually. So it becomes important for us to understand that there is no running away from these conflicts eventually. We need to uncover them, we need to address them and treat them.
Yeah. So back to your idea specifically of the role of free will, right? And
Oh, yes.
So we understand that from spiritualistic spiritist and Joanna de Angelis, how they bring the notion of free will. The idea that through our reincarnation and through our repeated prior experiences in this lifetime, but before this one, I love that the free will is this incredible treasure that each one of us have in our hands every moment of our lives. And it is the idea that we are given the choice, right? The freedom to choose, but also in that mechanism of free will, and of course the cause and effect, right? That is part of that
Yes.
free will. We are given the chance to grow. We're given the chance to learn from failures and successes, but ultimately we're given the chance to forge this path to shape our destinies, right? Can you comment, and I'd love for you to hear, I don't know why, but the thought popped in my mind, Yuri, that as I said, we are given the chance to forge our path. And somebody was telling me that the current I don't know if you have any work with that or any experience, but the as a parent maybe you do, but the current generation of parents are no longer considered called the helicopter parents, right? That hover around looking to make sure the kids are all right. But now they are the generation of the lawnmower parents, where they are actually creating the path for their children instead of allowing the children to choose their own path, allowing the children to fail and learn from their failure. Any thoughts on that? Have you thought about it? You as a young parent, right?
Yes, and what you're referencing, I think it's from the book The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt, and it's a
Yeah.
great book on psychology, bestseller I think last year or the year before. And he mentions some he makes that analogy where he says that there is no more helicopter, I mean, not there's no more. Usually, I mean, before there were a lot of helicopter parents, but now the generation, he says, is the snow plower. So like it's
Yeah.
just
The snowplow.
trucking
Okay.
the snow plower, just extremely like removing everything in its path, or just destroying everything, creating the path, not necessarily being the helicopter watching the child and everything. Because again, we are going through this period of transformation, and if we talk of planetary transition, all of that, but bringing more to ourselves, our own lives, we're seeing this change in society in general, especially the Western world, where we see this idea of the snowplower, let's call the snowplower parent,
Yeah.
where they don't want their children to suffer, they don't want their children to see pain, they don't want their children to have to discover things on their own. Everything is so easy nowadays because technology has allowed for a lot of comfort in our lives and a lot of safety. But the problem with the safetyism, which is a term that Jonathan Haidt, the author, uses, the problem with the safetyism is exactly this idea that we are depriving them, we're robbing their experiences for growth, we're robbing that necessary growth, such as the caterpillar to become butterfly needs to break out of the shell themselves.
Mhm.
If we go there, we cut it open, the butterfly dies. So
Yeah.
this idea of we need to face some things on our own as children as well, and as parents we must be aware of that they will encounter suffering out there, that they will encounter suffering even inside their own as they grow up, and if they find themselves without the tools.
Yeah. And it's very interesting. With the sense of safetyism, right? It is the concept that is born out of love. Would you agree?
It is 100% born out of love, and as a parent, like, I'm always conscious of trying to
Mhm.
like walk that line of how much how much free reign should I give, and if I'm seeing something they're playing on a playground, how much should I intervene and when should I intervene. But if they're doing some risky things to develop their bodies and their minds and their reflexes, I must allow that. Even if I see it, I'm like, oh, I'd rather be there under them to hold them if they fall. But
Yeah.
it's sort of this conscience of they need to go through that. They need to learn. If they fall, they fall, and then they will learn from that.
I have to share two things from my own experience, if it's okay, Yuri. But I was the considered in a family of six. I was considered the perfect child, a young child, like no problem at school, loved to read, loved to study, never ever ever went against my parents' will or dictum, right? To do this, do that. I was disobedient child. Uh, until I was no longer. That's what happens, adolescence, right? And I went through so many disruptions that was very interesting. But my mom would say to me when she could see clearly that I was in the crash course to very bad choices, right? Right at that age, and she would say, "Honey, right? Don't do it. You will blah blah blah." And I would tell mom, "Let me fail." And she said, "Why would I do that to you? Because you're going there, but I have already been there." She would reference two-way street, right? That she already been there and came back and has learned from her own failure. So she did not want me to fail like her. So I thought it was very interesting, this battle of wills, where I would say, "Let me fail, mother, please."
Absolutely, absolutely. It's an interesting piece that you bring because yes, as parents, if
Uh,
we could choose to have our children never to suffer, never to have pain, we would choose so.
yeah,
Out of love. The safetyism is born out of love. We want to create a safe environment, we want to create everything that's safe, but we also need to understand that when they go out there,
yeah,
when they go to school, when they go to work, when they eventually build their own families, when
hmm,
their life carries on, we're not going to be there and they will suffer. They will have pain. They will have challenges that we won't be there to help them because one, we can't, and two, it's unfeasible. So it is this constant process of maturing as a parent, understanding how much should I let them fail and how much should I help,
yeah,
And when tying back to our conversation of this path of the journey of the self, of this path of
hmm,
inner transformation, we think of ourselves also like the adults who are listening to this,
yeah,
of how we were as kids, how we were raised, and all of that. What do we bring, and also what do we bring from our past experiences, from our past lives? Because
yeah,
those children that we have next to us, these are immortal spirits. They
yeah,
carry some luggage with them that we don't know about, at least consciously we don't know
yeah,
about.
yeah,
So we must understand that they have their own challenges, and sometimes if we try to take the opportunity away from them, we maybe again be robbing an opportunity, a moment for them to learn something they need to learn.
yeah. It's very quite interesting and remarkable, right? The that you bring to us the family unit, right? This cell, that the most important cell of our society, our world, is each
Hmm.
family member. And how two things, two contradictory things. Number one is that we're there to provide that imprint. And the idea here, Yuri, is that I always remember St. Francis of Assisi, right, where he would say, "Preach the gospel all the time. When and if you need it, use your words." I
Hmm.
love that, because our our examples, right, are indeed what has this indelible imprint in our children. No matter how much freedom they have or not have to make mistakes or be successful, they see us as parents and they emulate from what we do, our choices. It's our imprinting, if you will. But the other aspect of it, if I may say here, is what you brought up. And I just wanted to repeat from my own words the idea that in that cell, while the parents are imprinting through their examples, their I guess the compass, right? The North Star that we hold dear and true that passes on to the next generation. We, all of those family members, we are all immortal spirits, meaning that how old is your youngest child, Yuri?
The oldest is 5.5. The youngest is 1.5.
Well, let's pretend that 1.5 year old child may be the oldest spirit, right? It
Oh
could
yeah.
be, and the most experienced, the most enlightened. It does not mean that you, as a father, will not do everything to the best of your ability, knowledge, and intention to help mold and love the child, right? But it could be that the child is actually going to teach all of you in your family with the enlightenment that he already brought to this life, right? So I love if we can perhaps talk a little bit about how the concept of free will interconnects with the concept of reincarnation in this context of spiritual growth, right?
Yes.
How do those two forces guide us to have this more conscious or even more purposeful existence? Right?
I think one of the things that Leon Denis says, another author that I know
Yeah,
you like as well,
I love it. Yeah.
he says the soul is the author of its own destiny or something like that. And I love that this idea that this is free will in a sentence. We are the authors of our own destinies. We are the ones that are going to either speed up the process or slow down the process, although progress is inevitable.
Yeah.
But we are either going to speed up the process or slow the process based on what I said before. How much of these conflicts are we addressing and trying to improve from? How much
Mhm.
are we actually facing inward? Because one of the things too that tying to Joanna de Angelis now, says about the idea of the inner transformation
Mhm.
and the inner self. She talks about how, trying to remember exactly what it was, how if we basically if we are at peace within, nothing from the outside can disturb us,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So like I think that is very powerful when
Mhm.
we think about that. She talks about these adversaries, or the adversaries themselves from the outside. They can't
Mhm.
do anything harmful to those, that's what she says, to those who are free within,
Mhm.
to those who are free within. So I think that, again, free will, making our own choices and understanding that those choices will have consequences, either positive or negative, either to speed up the process or slow down the process of evolution of our own selves. We understand then that it's very much looking inward and making this change without expecting something from the outside. And I think that is the biggest trap or the biggest downfall that we oftentimes have when we're trying to go for this journey of of individuation, or the journey of the self with a capital S. When, let's say, we're working on forgiveness and
Yeah.
we expect the other person, if we make that step, like, I'm gonna forgive, and we expect them to forgive us and they don't, all of a sudden it becomes so much harder for us to forgive, and
Yeah.
vice versa.
Yeah.
So expecting something from the outside is this, I like to say, trap, is this thing where it's almost like a pitfall that we have in this journey of self-discovery and inner change. What do you think?
I love it, but I have to go back to what you're saying about forgiveness, right? In this, as you mentioned, because we devoted several episodes in the recent months to discussing or reference the parable of the prodigal son, and what comes to my mind
Excellent.
immediately when you talked about it, Yuri, is the fact that the prodigal son is the young child, right? The youngest child that does fails all of the things that he did, and he comes back through the path of inner transformation, but also before he actually went through his own inner transformation, the path of awakening his own consciousness. Right? He goes. I would imagine this is my words in 2,000 years ago in Palestine, very different. But let's pretend he is a young man today, and he goes like, "Oh my goodness, what did I do? Right? I really made a big mistake. What to do? What to do?" And he comes back, and he comes back not only with a sense of guilt for doing it wrong to the father, to the community, to everyone, right? To himself, but in a sense of humility, he comes back to confess to what he before was a very naive young person doing all sorts of wrong, right? But he comes back asking for forgiveness. And the father, what does he do, Yuri? He forgives immediately,
Uh-huh.
unconditionally. He just embraces him. He kisses the young man upon his return. What I find it interesting here, what you're talking about, is the fact that the older brother is quite upset when he sees the father forgiving. It's not about uh, the act of forgiveness, but this is something that we need to be aware. Somehow, somewhere in our lives, when we fail and we hurt, and due to all the movements that we go through in our path of self-discovery and inner transformation, we will ask and receive forgiveness. But they're outsiders of this process that may not be yet at a point to even accept the forgiveness that is happening outside. Do you know what I mean? He was really taken. How, Father, could you do this? How could you forgive? As if forgiveness was something bad, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
really like that idea for us to be aware. Have we done that? How have
Mm-hmm.
we seen somebody that, let's say, this is completely fictitious, but I know somebody that did some really, really difficult things to Yuri, right? To you specifically, Yuri. And but the two of you reach a state of forgiveness, and I go like, no, 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 no. The drama in my head still fraught with conflicts. I am still judging that person for hurting you. Isn't it interesting how those conflicts can linger in our minds beyond the conflict itself being resolved?
Absolutely. And the parable, I love you brought that up because it's just something
Mhm.
John also talks about, the prodigal
Yeah,
son.
yeah,
It's very much applicable today.
yeah,
It is one of those another one of those thousands of things that Jesus said that
hmm,
is very much applicable today. And we have these, the three, let's call it the characters of the story, the two
hmm,
sons and the father. And it's interesting because Joanne is talking about how we must go and face these experiences and then come back. So like we get out of ourselves to get
yeah,
inside our own selves and make that change in a way. And I,
yeah,
I love this sort of like imagining this movement of going out to go in, or going out and
yeah,
then to
yeah,
discover something inside of us. And what did the father do? The father allowed him to go, which is interesting as well. Most people don't focus on the beginning of the parable as well,
yeah,
understanding that the when the young son said to his father like, oh, I want
mhm,
my shares of the state, like everything he was asking, even though the father knew it was not probably not going to end well from the material sense, the
yeah.
father
He
eventually
just
let the
did.
young son go, which is
Yeah,
very much what we were talking about before. Like he let the young son go, his youngest go, and then once he made those mistakes that that father in the parable probably predicted, he
yeah,
comes back and he embraces him. He's the merciful father, and of course Jesus was making this parable to illustrate this idea of our Heavenly Father, of God being this merciful being that allows us to have free will, such as the father of the parable, and allow us to exercise our free will to go and make mistakes, but then we learn from those mistakes. And this is something very valuable from the parable, to understand that the youngest son learned from his mistakes, came back with humility,
Yeah.
and saw a merciful father embracing him.
And I have to say, I mentioned to you my mother in my prior dialogue with her many lifetimes ago, it feels like, right? Decades ago. She, like this parable, was very merciful. She knew, she knew it. And I somehow influence her to accept me, to keep going on that course that I forged and head on toward failure. She knew it. So when I came back, hurt and all sorts of consequences from choices, she was there, Yuri, and she embraced lovingly
Oh,
toward me. Yeah. And so I think again, not only the parable, the words by Jesus as Luke brings to us. I think it's chapter 15, right?
15,
There's,
yes.
yeah, verses I think 11 to 32. So it's a relatively short parable, but it is so contemporary if you start to look at it from all the lessons that it gives to us, right?
And then you look at the older son as well, like you said. So the youngest one set off to a distant country, everything went wrong, and he came back, and the father embraced him. And the oldest son was angry and
Yeah,
envious, and
yeah,
they don't want what happened with his younger brother, like him receiving everything. And
yeah,
what does the father do? Also embraces the older son. So again,
exactly. Yeah, yeah,
understanding
yeah.
this difference in these two spirits, the younger and the oldest son, just how important it is to embrace both of them, to meet them where they're at with love.
Yeah, because if you think about it, right, the father is completely, he has reached the journey of the self, right? He's
Yeah.
there. The young son is completely not, and he goes da da da, and it sets the process of course correction. So when he gets to the worst of the worst, right, the deepest end, he
Mm-hmm.
comes back. There's no more where he can go and fall even beyond that. He has reached the worst of the worst. Then he comes back on a different movement toward himself. And I think this is for all of us. This is a lesson of, be kind to yourself, even when you're still going toward the wrong direction in terms of using your free will and dealing with a lot of difficulties. We're still coming back, and we are able to come back and go back to the father. But as you said, the other brother, he is not there yet, right? He's stuck in a world of egoic judgment. He's still, in my opinion, this is my opinion, everyone. I believe the older brother was thinking, oh my goodness, he's coming back, Yodi. He's coming back and he wants more of the inheritance. What can I do to control? What I can do is not forgive him and interfere in the father to forgive, because if the young son was quote unquote dead, there would be no more impact to the material existence that the older son has. One of the things that is very interesting as well, and in the book by Haroldo Dutra on the parables, right? He discussed many, many different parables, but in this one, he gives us a historical point of view, right? What was happening first century Palestine, and he brings to us an awareness that if somebody had made the same terrible choices and mistakes as the youngest child had done, Yuri, he would have been expelled,
Oh,
right?
yes.
Right? The expelled, get out of here, get out of my house, get out. And but a bit of a tribe, right? A very small community of people that live in that place would most likely had judged him just like the older brother judged, and you would have stoned that young man to death for what he did. So it's very interesting, right? The idea of can we shift our our thoughts, our ideas, our judgment, and look at this beautiful parable and look at it. How can I be forgiven? Even when I have all the right to not, can I be the bigger one here?
Yes, and I mean, it is very much what you're saying, and I'm thinking of again the father,
Uh-huh.
and the parable was spoken 2,000 years ago,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah, yeah,
And if we think about it, it's still very much applicable today when we're not, at least, stoning people anymore. So the idea is, back then, what he said, what Jesus said, and when he said it was probably extremely outrageous for anybody to hear that and
yeah,
think there's no way a father would do that. And we don't even have to go that far, because the parable says that the son squandered the money with property, with prostitutes, and a lot of,
oh, oh,
again, material things that we talked about, the material pleasures. We
yeah,
don't even need to go that far if we think of Paul, or before, when he was Saul of Tarsus, and
yeah,
how his
yeah,
father basically treated him, and he didn't do half the things that the younger son in the in the parable has said. And so we can definitely see how, taking into the context of the zeitgeist, or like the
yes,
whatever was happening in that moment in time, culturally speaking, it was extremely unheard of a father to do that. And the older son is sort of speaking as the collective voice of the people,
I love
who are
it.
saying who are
Yeah,
saying the voice who's saying, there's no way, why are you showering him with all of this, love, all of these material things, killing our fattened calf, and the robe, the mantle, I forgot exactly what piece of clothing it was, but the ring and all of those
yeah,
things. Why are you doing that after all he has done for our reputation? Because family
yeah,
back then was also very tied to the reputation. It wasn't just the squandering of the material things, but how did you do it? So you're staining, the or tainting the name of the family. And the
yeah,
younger son has done that. So the
yes,
older one is basically the voice of the people back then. And it's
yeah.
so interesting to think that.
Yeah, I love where you're going, right? Because it is the zeitgeist, the spirit of an era, and we're talking about 2 millennia ago. But Yuri, if you go back to today, right? What is our zeitgeist in relationship to judgment? I think the stones that we metaphorically throw at each other uh, has become an all times violence, an all times peak of violence of just coming from everywhere, because we do have things such as social media where my
Hmm.
opinions are the stones, right? I can stone you, Yuri. I can so easily. I can crucify you. I can kill you with my words, my opinions, and made it publicly like a stoning, and there's very little that you can do once it's cast, right?
Up, yes, because technology has, what it has done is has
Hmm.
expanded, as mean, like, in terms of expansion, this village.
Yeah, yeah,
Before, it
yeah,
was just a community, as you're saying, and
yeah,
things didn't get broadcast that much. But now, the metaphorical stones can come from all corners of the world, because technology has allowed for that.
yeah, yeah. But Yuri, surprisingly, we are at the end of our time. Do you have any final thought that you would like to bring to everyone here before we go?
I guess, just in the same vein of this inner transformation, is to understand that we must transform ourselves inwardly first,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
not the outward aspect will come after we
yeah,
transform the inner aspect. That inner
yeah,
aspect, the transformation of that, is rife with pain and challenge and shame and all those things that we must face in
yeah.
order to accomplish it. So let's not give up in our journeys.
Yeah, I'd like to say thank you, and to leave my final words, which is acknowledgement that one of the most uh, impactful parts of what Joanna teaches and that we brought today, really full frontal, right, is the idea that the psychological and spiritual growth are deeply interconnected, right, Yuri? And as such, Joanna de Angelis brings suggestions or ideas that whenever we face struggles, when we confront our challenges, we're actually opening ourselves up to the potential. It's not a fatal thing, but we are actually, as we struggle, as we are challenged, as we fail, that's when we are opening for our potential inner transformation, inner growth, and getting to where we need to be from that journey of the self, right? To embark on the path for inner transformation. So I want to just say thank you. Thank you, Yuri. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to this episode. I do hope this very informal conversation has inspired you as much as it has inspired me to take the next step, right? Let's go together on our own journey toward our self, right? And until next time, I just want to say, let us all embrace the idea of continuous evolving, continuous growth, continuous curiosity, and seeking answers. But for you, if this is the first time that you are listening to a program, please take a note that our psychology and spirituality weekly talks are based, you must have taken note of the works by Joanna de Angelis, and we do hope that you're able to perhaps expand your own concepts on, by juxtaposing spirituality and psychological concepts. We want to also thank you, not only beyond you, Yuri, all of our sponsors, Mansão do Caminho, the United States Spiritist Federation, the International Spiritist Council, AME Brazil, the Brazilian arm of the Medical Spiritist Association. We'll be back next week with another episode, so stay tuned. Until then, please take care and keep embracing the journey. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.